The moment he stepped into the low-lit bistro, everything in the air shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with that sharp, invisible snap you feel before a storm breaks. The waitress with the red apron and tired eyes spotted the ring on his hand before she saw his face, and something in her expression twisted. Not curiosity, not confusion, something older, colder. "My mother had that same ring," she said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear, and the whole room seemed to hold its breath. She didn't say it warmly. She said it like an accusation. And in the split second before he could answer, every pair of eyes in the room silently asked the same question. What is a man like him doing in a place like this? Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now back to him. He didn't respond right away. He didn't need to. His stillness did the speaking, broad shoulders steady beneath a charcoal jacket, jaw tightening just slightly as her words echoed across the room. The ring, brushed gold, worn smooth on the edges, caught the warm overhead bulb, but not in a romantic glow, more like a spotlight exposing something no one was prepared for. The waitress, her name tag read Mara, tilted her head, confusion turning into boldness, boldness turning into something uglier. "You hear me?" she pressed, adjusting the tray under her arm. "My mother had that same ring. So unless you're telling me you know her." Her implication hung thick and sour. The nearby couple paused mid-conversation. A busboy stopped wiping his table. Even the kitchen doors swinging slowed, as though the place itself leaned in to watch. He finally lifted his eyes, deep, calm, the kind of calm that scares people who expect submission. "I heard you," he said. Simple, controlled. But Mara wasn't done. "Where'd you get it?" she asked, stepping closer. "Pawn shop? Flea market? Or did someone give it to you because—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Her smirk filled in the blanks, ugly and unmistakable. That was the first strike, the assumption. The second came faster, sharper. "People don't usually walk in here wearing things like that," she added, eyes flicking from his ring to his. Skin to his clothes. Clean, well cut, understated, but apparently not understated enough. He looked like money, but not the kind she was trained to respect. Behind him, a group of men at the bar exchanged looks, the kind of looks that said we already know where this is going. One of them muttered, not quietly enough, probably fake. Another let out a low laugh. Mara folded her arms, chin lifting with confidence she hadn't earned. "You got a reservation?" she asked. "Because we're full tonight. And we don't take walk-ins who—" She didn't finish the sentence again, but her eyes did. They traveled down his jacket, over his dark skin, to the watch on his wrist, simple black leather, no logo, and then back to the ring. He inhaled once, slow. He'd seen this script before. At 17, a jewelry clerk had followed him around a mall store, whispering into her earpiece as if he couldn't hear her. At 23, a hotel manager had asked him 3 times to confirm his identity during check-in because, "Sir, you don't look like the photo." At 30, an auction host mispronounced his name on purpose, twice, before finally asking if he was in the right room. And now, another scene, another room, another stranger who thought she already knew his worth. Mara leaned in. "If you're trying to impress someone with that ring, it's not working. My mom had it. Exact same one. Sold it years ago." She snapped her fingers. Funny how things end up in the wrong hands. The words hit the room like a slap. A man eating alone froze mid-bite. Someone near the window whispered, "Did she really just say that?" The busboy's eyes widened. He recognized the tone, the tilt of her body, the tension crackling in the air. He knew a line had been crossed. And then, a voice from the back, soft but steady. "Mara, maybe you should stop." A young hostess, barely 20, name tag crooked, stood with her hands clasped, trying to disappear and be brave at the same time. Mara shot her a look sharp enough to cut. "Stay out of it." The hostess swallowed hard but didn't move. She kept watching him, as if she could already sense there was more beneath the surface. More than the ring, more than the silence, more than the insult that had just been fired point-blank in front of half the dining room. Mara stepped even closer. Breath huffed, attitude rising. "Look, if you're gonna stay, I need to see some proof. ID, receipt, Something that shows that ring is actually yours. His fingers tightened just slightly around the menu, knuckles steady, not white. Proof, he echoed. Of ownership? Mara smirked. Unless you're scared to show it. The bar fell silent. A chair squeaked across the floor. The tension grew legs and stood in the middle of the room, waiting for his response. But he didn't raise his voice. He didn't stand up. He didn't argue. He simply looked at her with an expression so controlled it felt like the room wasn't big enough to hold it. He reached slowly into his jacket. The hostess leaned forward. Mara crossed her arms again, waiting for the moment that would confirm every assumption she had already formed. And then, just before he pulled anything out, he spoke, voice low, even, unshakable. Your mother didn't just have a ring like this. He paused. The room listened. This was hers. And Mara, suddenly pale, suddenly unmoored, froze exactly the way he knew she would. For a long moment, no one moved. Mara stood frozen, tray digging into her palm, as if the floor had shifted beneath her feet. The man she had mocked did not raise his voice, did not lean forward, did not try to shame her the way she had tried to shame him. He simply let the truth settle into the room like a weight no one could lift. This was hers, he repeated, and a ripple of unease moved through the bar area. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Someone whispered, "What does he mean by that?" Mara blinked rapidly, her confidence slipping with every second he remained calm. "That is not possible," she said, words trembling in a way her arrogance had never allowed. "My mother sold that ring. Years ago, before she died." He nodded slowly. "I know," he said, and something in his voice hinted at a history buried deeper than anyone in the room could guess. The young hostess, still hovering by the podium, looked between them with growing realization, her eyes widening as the pieces began aligning. The air felt charged, the way it does right before thunder breaks. Mara tried to grab hold of the moment slipping out of her grip. "It cannot be the same ring," she insisted, louder now, projecting to the room as if volume could undo the insult she had hurled minutes before. "There are lots of rings like that. Lots." A man at the bar muttered. "No, there are not." A woman near the window added, "That design is old. Custom, even." Mara shot them a glare, then turned back toward him. "Just tell me what you mean. Tell me how you have my mother's ring." Her voice softened, but not out of kindness. It softened because fear had started to creep into the edges. He held her gaze, unblinking. "She gave it to me," he said quietly, "when I was a child." That sentence detonated through the restaurant. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered, "What?" Another customer stiffened in his chair, confusion painted across his face. Mara staggered back half a step. "What are you talking about? My mother never knew anyone like you." The word "you" hung in the air, coated in the same venom she had used earlier. He inhaled slowly, letting the insult pass without flinching. "Your mother worked for my family," he said, voice steady. "She cared for me. She was the only person in that house who ever treated me like I mattered." The hostess raised a hand to her mouth, stunned. A low murmur rolled across the tables. A memory flickered behind his eyes, and for a moment he was not a grown man standing in a hostile dining room. He was a boy no older than 6, curled on a carpeted floor while a woman with gentle hands tied his shoes and hummed softly under her breath. "She wore this ring every day," he continued. "It was the only nice thing she owned." Mara's face drained of color. "This is not real," she whispered. "It cannot be." He let the silence answer her. Then his words cut softly through the tension. "She gave it to me the last time I saw her. She said if I ever made something of myself, I should keep it as a reminder of someone who believed in me first." A woman in a blue sweater near the bar put a hand over her heart. A server stopped mid-walk, his tray tipping as he forgot to move. Even the kitchen door stopped swinging, as if the whole building had leaned in to listen. Mara's breath hitched, but denial was the only shield she had left. "You are lying," she said, sharply. "My mother never worked for any wealthy people. She was a waitress. She was always a waitress." "Because she never told you," he replied. "She was ashamed of that part of her life. Ashamed of how she was treated. Ashamed of how she was dismissed. And ashamed she had to leave her job so suddenly." His jaw tightened. "You do not know what she went through." Mara's eyes darted, unsure where to land. She left that job because she got sick." "Yes," he said softly. "But she left sooner than she wanted to. And not because she was weak. Because she was tired of being spoken to the way you spoke to me tonight. Mara pressed her lips together, her breath uneven. Stop it, she whispered. You cannot know that. But everything in his voice said he did. I visited her in the hospital, he added. I was older by then. Old enough to understand what she meant when she said she hoped no one would ever treat me the way they treated her. The room sank into pin-drop silence. A man at the bar muttered, "Oh my God." The hostess took a small step forward, her eyes shimmering. Sir, is that really true? He nodded once. It is. Mara's voice cracked. Why did she give you the ring? She never took it off. Not for anything. His answer was simple, painful, and final. Because she did not want you to inherit the life that came with it. Mara covered her mouth, breath shaking through her fingers. A dozen emotions flickered across her face. Confusion, disbelief, humiliation, fear, and beneath all of it, a truth she could no longer outrun. Her mother had lived an entire life before her, one she had never talked about, one marked by the same sharp tone Mara had thrown at him without hesitation. He looked around the room then, not angry, not triumphant, just quietly resolute. She told me to forgive people who speak from ignorance, he said. But she also told me never to let them decide who I am. The words fell into the restaurant like a verdict. Mara tried to speak, but nothing came out. And for the first time since the confrontation started, it was not her voice that filled the room. It was the weight of the truth her mother left behind. For several seconds after his final words, the restaurant remained suspended in an almost unreal stillness, the kind of silence that does not happen by accident but by impact, the kind that follows truth when it lands so squarely that no one can pretend they did not hear it. Mara's hands trembled slightly, though she tried to hide them by gripping the edge of the counter behind her. Her throat tightened as she searched his face for some fragment of a lie to cling to, something she could tear apart and use to rebuild the certainty she had walked into this room with. But there was nothing. The man standing in front of her did not look like someone inventing a story. He looked like someone who had carried a truth for years, quietly, privately, until tonight forced it into the light. A middle-aged man sitting at the corner table shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the exit as though the weight in the room was almost too much to sit inside. A young couple clasped hands under their table, murmuring to each other about how unbelievable and sad the revelation was. The hostess, still clutching her notepad with white knuckles, seemed torn between staying silent and stepping toward him again. He did not move. He just stood there, grounded, steady, as if every breath he took was calibrated to keep the tension from tipping into chaos. Mara swallowed hard and forced a shaky laugh, thin and brittle. So what? She said, attempting to regain even a shred of authority. Just because my mother worked for some wealthy people does not mean she gave you that ring. You are twisting things. He met her gaze without blinking. I am not twisting anything, he said, his tone low but unwavering. I was there when she removed it. She pressed it into my hand and told me to keep it safe because, in her words, I was the only person who ever treated her like she was more than the job she did. A faint tremor passed through Mara's expression. She would not say that, she muttered, her voice thin as paper. His eyes softened, not with pity but with a memory she could not access. She said it because she lived it. Another murmur rose from the dining room, subtle but unmistakable. People were no longer just watching, they were reassessing. They were replaying every word Mara had thrown at him since the moment he walked through the door. A waitress near the kitchen entrance whispered, "This is bad," to a coworker who could only nod. Mara stepped back, breathing uneven, her confidence cracking visibly now. "You are trying to make me look like a bad person," she said, voice tightening defensively. "I was just doing my job." Her justification hung limp in the air. He tilted his head slightly. "Were you?" he asked. "Or were you doing what you have learned from years of watching how certain people get treated and deciding that was normal?" Mara's jaw clenched. "You do not know me. I know the way you spoke to me," he said, keeping his tone even. "And I know your mother would have never used that tone on anyone." That struck deeper than anything else. Mara flinched like he had reached across the counter and touched a bruise she did not want exposed. She opened her mouth to fire back, but before she could form words, the hostess finally gathered her courage. Her voice wavered at first, but she steadied it quickly. "Sir," she said gently, "did your family ever talk about her? About how she left?" His shoulders lifted with a slow, heavy breath. No, he answered. Not once. They pretended she never existed. That is why she gave me the ring. She did not want her life erased the way they tried to erase her. Mara stared at him, stunned into stillness. And in that suspended moment, she looked less like the confident server who had confronted him earlier, and more like someone who had just realized her mother had lived an entire history she had never been brave enough to ask about. The man behind the bar cleared his throat. Look, I do not know everything that happened here tonight, he said carefully. But you spoke to him like he was beneath you. And now it turns out he is connected to your family in a way none of us knew. Mara whipped around defensively. I did not know who he was. The hostess stepped closer, hands trembling but voice firm. That is the problem. You should not have had to know who he was to treat him like a human being. A few customers murmured in agreement. One elderly woman near the window said softly, Your mother worked hard. You should honor that. Not repeat the pain she had to endure. Mara's breath stuttered. Her denial collapsed under the weight of too many witnesses and too much truth. She looked back at him, eyes glistening with a cocktail of anger, humiliation, and something that almost resembled regret. If what you are saying is true, she whispered, then why come here? Why tonight? Why act like you are testing me? His expression did not change. His voice stayed level. Because I did not come here for you. I came here because this was her favorite place before she left the city. She brought me here once when I was small. I wanted to see it again. The room tightened with emotion, dense as fog. But you, he added, made this moment about who you thought I was instead of who she taught me to be. Mara blinked back tears, but none of them fell. She looked trapped between wanting to apologize and wanting to escape her own reflection. The man finally took a single step forward, not aggressive, not challenging, just definitive. Your mother deserved better, he said simply. And so did I. There was no threat in his voice, no rage, no raised volume. Only truth. And truth, spoken calmly, can feel heavier than any shout. Mara's voice broke on the smallest whisper. What do you want from me? He held her eyes, letting the question breathe for a moment before he answered. I want you to understand exactly what she did not want to pass on to you. The restaurant remained still, suspended in a moment of reckoning that felt larger than the walls around it. And for the first time all night, Mara could not run from it. The question hung in the room with a weight that made even the lights seem dimmer, as if the entire restaurant had exhaled at once and now waited on a single breath that had not yet been taken. Mara's voice had cracked when she asked what he wanted from her, but he did not answer right away. He studied her face with a stillness that was not cold but deliberate, the kind of quiet that forces a person to hear their own heartbeat, their own fear, their own conscience. When he finally spoke, his tone was steady enough to make the walls listen. I want you, he said, to understand the cost of what you said tonight. Mara looked down, fingers twisting against each other as if she could erase the actions of the last 15 minutes by rubbing them away. But she could not. The words she had thrown so casually earlier now echoed back to her with a hollow edge that made her chest tighten. Behind her, the bar staff stood motionless, caught between wanting to disappear and wanting to witness what came next. The elderly woman near the window leaned forward slightly, as though she understood this moment was no longer mere conversation, but something closer to reckoning. Mara forced herself to look up. I did not mean, he lifted a hand slightly, just enough to stop her. Intention does not erase impact, he said, and it does not rewrite the truth of how you treated someone you thought did not belong here. Mara's throat tightened again. I did not know who you were, she whispered. You should not have had to, he replied. Respect is not something that should depend on a person's appearance, or clothing, or assumptions about where they come from. The hostess stepped closer, shoulders squared even though her hands trembled at her sides. Sir, she said softly, I believe you. Everything you said about her mother. It feels true. Mara swung toward the younger woman with a flash of defensive anger, but the hostess held her ground. I watched how you talked to him, the hostess continued. It was not professional. It was not kind. And it was not how your mother treated people when she worked here years ago. Mara's breath hitched, a small sound that barely reached the tables nearby. You did not know my mother. The hostess shook her head gently. No, I only know what he shared. But I can tell you she raised you to be better than what you showed tonight. A hush spread again across the dining room as customers absorbed the truth layered beneath the statement. Mara blinked hard, and for the first time her voice softened not with fear or defensiveness, but with something almost childlike. "I did not know she struggled," she whispered. "She never told me any of this. She just worked and came home tired. I thought we were the same. I thought she was proud of her life." "She was proud of you," the man said quietly. "But she was not proud of how people treated her. She told me once she hoped you would never have to feel the kind of pain she hid." Mara's breath wavered. "What pain?" He held her gaze, his voice carrying the weight of memory. Being spoken to like she was less. Being dismissed before she even opened her mouth. Being told, in 1,000 small ways, that she was good enough to serve but never good enough to be seen. He let the words sit for a long, unbroken moment. "Everything you did to me tonight was everything she prayed you would never learn." Mara pressed a hand to her forehead as though her thoughts were splintering. "I did not know," she whispered again, but this time it lacked the sharpness of denial. It sounded more like regret. The man's voice softened slightly. "Most people do not. That is how these patterns survive. People repeat what they have absorbed without realizing it is poison." A man at the bar nodded slowly. "He is right," he said, not unkindly. "We all pick up things we do not question. But when someone shows us the mirror, we cannot pretend we do not see ourselves." Mara's shoulders slumped, her earlier fire extinguished. She looked smaller now, not in body but in certainty. "I do not know how to fix this," she whispered. The man took a slow breath. "You start," he said, "by acknowledging what you did without making excuses. You start by understanding that your mother carried a story she hoped you would rise above, not repeat." He paused, letting her meet his eyes again. "And then you choose who you want to be when the world shows you your reflection." Mara's eyes shimmered, but she forced herself to hold steady. "I am sorry," she said. The words were quiet, but they did not shake. "I am truly sorry. Not because of who you are, but because of who I became without even realizing it." A soft murmur passed through the room. This apology did not fix everything, but it cracked something open. The man nodded slightly. "That is a beginning." As he turned slightly, the staff and guests could feel that the moment had shifted. Not resolved, not concluded, but shifted. The air was no longer suffocating. It was waiting for what he would do next, for what his silence meant, for the truth he still had not revealed, the truth that would change the room in a way none of them expected, because he had not yet told them who he was now. And when he did, nothing about this night would remain the same. The room held its breath as he stood there, every eye fixed on him, every sound in the restaurant shrinking into a thin, distant hum. The apology Mara offered had cracked the surface, but no one believed the moment was over. Not the staff, not the guests, and certainly not him. There was something unfinished in the air, something waiting for release, like a truth that had been circling the room since the moment he walked in, gathering weight with every second. He looked at Mara one last time before shifting his gaze across the dining room, scanning the faces of people who were no longer strangers, but witnesses. Witnesses to a story they had not expected to be part of. "When I was a boy," he began, his voice low but carrying the kind of clarity that cuts through noise without raising volume. "Your mother gave me this ring, yes. But she also gave me something else, something I did not understand until years later." The hostess moved closer, drawn in, the notepad clutched against her chest. The bartender leaned over the counter, unable to pretend he was polishing glasses anymore. Even the couple at the far corner set down their forks. No one moved. No one interrupted. He continued. "She told me that the world would try to tell me who I was before I ever opened my mouth. She told me people would look at my skin, my clothes, the way I walked into a room, and decide I belonged somewhere else." Murmurs rippled through the restaurant, soft but sharp with recognition. "And she told me," he said, "that the day I stopped letting them decide, that was the day I would finally understand my worth." Mara's breath trembled, and her shoulders collapsed inward as though she understood the full weight of what she had betrayed tonight. He looked at her directly, not with anger, not with cruelty, but with a truth she could not deflect. "Tonight," he said, "you tried to decide that for me." She nodded, barely, a tiny motion swallowed by regret. "I am sorry," she repeated, quieter, her voice fragile, but sincere. "I truly am." He inhaled deeply, letting her words settle without immediately absolving them. Then he turned slightly, addressing not only her, but the whole room. You all deserve to know something, he said. Something I have not said yet. Conversation stilled instantly. A fork clinked against a plate in the back, too loud in the quiet. The restaurant seemed to draw the walls closer, tightening around the truth that was about to emerge. The reason I came here tonight, he said, was not only to honor her memory. Mara looked up, confused. The hostess's breath caught. The bartender straightened. This place, he continued slowly, letting the words unfurl with purpose. This restaurant is part of a group that was put up for acquisition months ago. A frown creased Mara's forehead. Acquisition? He nodded once. Yes. Your mother told me she always dreamed of owning her own place one day. She said she wanted to build a restaurant where she could treat people the way she wished she had been treated. His gaze dropped to the ring. She never lived to see that dream. But I did. A collective stillness overtook the room, the kind of stillness that comes right before a revelation detonates. 2 years ago, he said, I founded a hospitality investment firm. And last month, after a long negotiation, the owners of this restaurant group agreed to sell. Mara blinked, the color draining from her face. The manager behind the bar stiffened. The hostess's hand flew to her mouth. He spoke the next sentence with quiet, devastating clarity. As of 3 weeks ago, this restaurant belongs to me. A shockwave passed through the room. Gasps. Whispers. Someone in the back whispered, Oh my God. A man near the bar muttered, He owns it? Mara staggered a step backward, her fingers gripping the counter for balance. You own this place? He nodded without a hint of pride or flourish. Yes. And I came tonight, anonymously, to see it the way she would have seen it. To sit in the space she once loved. He paused, letting everyone hear the next line. But instead, I was met with the same treatment she tried to protect me from. Mara let out a small sound, halfway between a gasp and a sob. I did not know, she whispered, shaking her head. I swear I did not know. You were not supposed to know, he said. Because how you treat people when you think they are nobody is the truest measure of who you are. A woman near the window murmured, That is the truth. The hostess stepped forward, voice steady despite the emotion swelling in her eyes. Sir, what happens now? He looked at her, then at Mara, then at the staff and the silent audience around him. Now, he said, we decide what kind of place this will be, what kind of people will represent it, and whose values will guide it forward. Mara swallowed hard, her voice barely audible. Are you going to fire me? The question echoed, heavy and trembling. All eyes turned to him. He did not answer immediately. He looked at her the same way her mother once looked at him when handing him the ring, with a mixture of sorrow, memory, and something undefined. That depends, he finally said. Not on who I am, but on who you are willing to become. The room sat suspended, waiting for the verdict that had not yet arrived. And the night, once ordinary, had become something none of them would ever forget. The restaurant did not simply fall silent this time. It seemed to contract around him, as if every wall, every hanging light fixture, every polished surface understood that what came next would define the room far more than the food ever had. Mara stood rooted to the spot, her hands trembling against her apron as though afraid to let go of the only thing keeping her upright. The other employees exchanged glances, the kind that acknowledged a truth none of them expected to confront on an ordinary night. He kept his gaze steady, calm, and unhurried as he looked at Mara. You asked me if I was going to fire you, he said quietly, but the real question is this. Do you understand why what happened tonight cannot happen again? Mara swallowed, her throat visibly tightening. Yes, she whispered, though the word carried the weight of uncertainty. I think I do. He shook his head slowly. Thinking is not enough. Understanding is not enough. The way you spoke to me tonight was not a mistake of ignorance. It was a choice built on a pattern that goes deeper than this room. Mara winced as if the truth itself stung. The hostess lingered nearby, her eyes darting between them as if silently wishing someone would ease the tension, but knowing it could not be eased, not yet. He went on, his voice taking on the tone of someone who had learned to carry sorrow without letting it consume him. Your mother worked for my family, yes, but what she endured was not just the hardship of her job. It was the daily weight of being treated as if she was less than other people. His eyes shifted briefly, as if replaying memories long buried. The way you spoke to me tonight, the assumptions you made, the tone you used, they were echoes of the same wounds she once carried in silence. Mara's voice cracked as she finally looked at him, truly looked at him. I never meant to treat anyone like that, she whispered. I swear I did not. He nodded. You may not have meant it, but it happened. And intention does not undo consequence. The bartender finally stepped forward, unable to keep silent. Sir, he said carefully, if I may, she is not always like this. We all have bad nights. The man turned his attention to him, his calm shifting into something sharper, a subtle intensity that made the bartender step back. Do you believe, he asked, that her behavior tonight was simply a bad night? The bartender hesitated. His eyes shifted toward Mara, then toward the hostess, who was watching with a stern, almost pleading expression. At last he exhaled and answered with a quiet honesty. No, she gets frustrated easily, and sometimes she says things she should not. But it is never this bad. The man nodded slowly, absorbing the admission. That is the point, he said. These things do not start as storms. They start as small gusts of wind, ignored because they do not tear anything down right away. He turned fully back to Mara. And tonight was not an accident. It was a culmination. A moment where the mask you believed you were wearing slipped. Mara closed her eyes, tears building but refusing to fall. What do you want me to do? She asked, her voice barely audible. How do I fix this? He did not answer immediately. Instead, he lifted the ring slightly, letting it catch the warm overhead light. Your mother told me once, he said, that the hardest thing a person can do is unlearn what they were taught by a world that did not treat them fairly. Mara's eyes opened slowly. He continued, if you want to stay here, if you want to be part of this place moving forward, then you need to unlearn the behaviors that brought us to this moment. He paused. The room remained painfully still. This restaurant will not be led by people who treat others the way your mother was treated. Not ever again. Mara nodded, wiping at her face with shaking fingers. I am willing, she said. I do not want to be this person. I want to change. The hostess stepped beside her, placing a tentative hand on her arm. I will help her, the young woman said firmly. If she stays, I will help hold her accountable. The gesture surprised the room. Even Mara, who looked at the hostess as though she could not understand why someone would stand beside her after everything that had just unfolded. The man looked at the two women, absorbing the sincerity of the gesture. Then he spoke with the quiet authority of someone who was used to carrying large decisions. Then here is what will happen, he said. Starting tomorrow morning, everything about this restaurant changes. Training, standards, expectations, culture. He scanned the room. No one spoke. No one dared. Every staff member will undergo bias training and conduct review. Every complaint that has ever been dismissed will be reopened. Every former employee who left because of mistreatment will be contacted. He turned back to Mara. You will stay on tonight. But your future here depends on more than remorse. It depends on whether you can rise above the patterns your mother hoped you would never inherit. Mara nodded vigorously, tears slipping down her face. I will, she whispered. I promise I will. He held her gaze for a long moment before finally speaking again, each word deliberate. Then tonight, he said, you begin the work she never had the chance to finish. And with that, the balance of the room shifted again, not with fear, not with anger, but with the gravity of a truth that had finally found its place. For a long moment after his final words in Part 6, the room remained suspended in a kind of reverent stillness, as if everyone inside the restaurant was suddenly aware that they were witnessing the precise moment a legacy shifted course. No one moved. No one dared break the silence that had settled over the tables and bar stools and polished floorboards. The weight of his authority was not loud. It did not need to be. It moved through the air the way a truth long avoided finally takes its rightful place, steady and unshakable. Mara stood with both hands gripping the edge of the counter, not to defy anything, but simply to keep herself upright beneath the enormity of what had unfolded. Her face was streaked from crying, yet she did not hide it. There was a new expression there now, something closer to acceptance, maybe even humility. The hostess remained beside her, a quiet pillar of support she had not expected and did not feel she deserved, but did not push away. The man looked at the two women, then slowly swept his gaze toward the rest of the staff. This moment, he said, is not just about one mistake or one person. It is about every moment like this that has gone unchecked. The bartender, still frozen near the register, bowed his head slightly, as if acknowledging his own silent complicity, the things he had seen but never spoken up about. A busboy near the far wall swallowed hard, pressing a stack of dishes tightly to his chest. I want every one of you, the man continued, to understand that the history of this place begins again tonight. And the way you carry yourselves from this moment forward will determine whether it becomes a place built on dignity or one built on excuses. A deep exhale rippled across the tables, subtle but unified, like the entire dining room finally letting go of a breath they did not realize they had been holding. One of the customers, a man who had watched everything with folded arms and narrowed eyes, lifted his hand slightly. "Sir," he said respectfully, "if I may, you handled this better than most would have. You did not raise your voice. You did not humiliate her the way she tried to humiliate you." The man nodded gently. Power does not need volume. Power needs clarity. Several guests murmured in agreement, and someone near the back whispered, "That is leadership." But the man did not bask in their admiration. He returned his attention to Mara, who stood straighter despite the tremors still visible in her hands. "You asked how to fix this," he reminded her, tone steady. "You cannot erase the words you used tonight, but you can ensure they never come from your mouth again toward anyone. Not here. Not anywhere." Mara nodded quickly, almost desperately. "I will do the training," she said. "All of it. Whatever you require. I want to learn." "Learning is only the first step," he replied. "The work comes in choosing different words when the old ones rise to your tongue. It comes in noticing the assumptions you make before they become actions. It comes in honoring your mother's memory by refusing to repeat the things that hurt her." Mara's chin trembled, tears welling again. "I failed her tonight," she whispered. "No," he said gently. "You failed yourself. But if you listen, if you are willing to grow, you could still honor her." The hostess squeezed Mara's arm lightly, a soft encouragement. "You are not alone in this," she said. "We will hold each other accountable. All of us." The man nodded in approval before shifting his attention to the restaurant manager who had appeared from the back, clearly having watched enough from the shadows to know he needed to step forward. The manager straightened his tie quickly, trying to compose himself. "Sir," he said nervously, "I apologize for not intervening sooner. I should have been here." The man cut him off with a slight shake of his head. "Being present is not the same as being accountable," he said. "Where were you when she needed guidance before she crossed the line? Where were you when this culture was growing beneath your leadership?" The manager's face flushed a deep red, embarrassment choking his voice. "You are right," he said. "I have overlooked things. I did not realize. I did not understand." "Understand now," the man replied. "Because your leadership will not continue unless it serves this place with integrity. If you stay, it will be under new expectations." The manager nodded vigorously, humbled into sincerity. The customers watched all of this unfold, each of them bearing witness to a kind of justice that did not require shouting, threats, or spectacle. It was justice delivered through truth, through memory, through the unshakable quiet of a man who knew exactly who he was and refused to be diminished. He then lifted the ring once more, letting the warm light catch its worn edges. "Your mother," he said to Mara, "was one of the few people in my childhood who treated me with dignity. And dignity is something no one forgets." Mara wiped her face again, tears finally falling freely. "I wish I had known her the way you did," she whispered. He softened, just a fraction. "You can still learn the parts of her that mattered most." Again the room shifted, less heavy now, more grounded, more aware of possibility. A customer near the window raised her glass slightly. "To her," she said softly. The man paused, then nodded once. "To her," he echoed. Dozens of heads bowed in subtle agreement. And for the first time that night, warmth began to return to the room, not because the hurt was gone, but because something more powerful had taken its place: truth, accountability, and the beginning of change. But the night was far from over. There was one more revelation he had not yet spoken, one more truth that would send another ripple through the room and shift this story from quiet justice into something even deeper. The warmth that had begun to seep back into the restaurant after the quiet toast did not settle for long. It hovered, tentative, fragile, as if the room sensed there was still one final truth waiting to be spoken, a truth the man had been carrying with a kind of steady restraint since the moment he walked through the door. He looked at the ring once more, then lowered his hand and let his gaze sweep across the faces before him, grounding the moment with the calm certainty of someone who understood the full weight of what he was about to reveal. "There is something else you all deserve to know," he said, his voice even but edged with gravity, and the room tightened again, breaths held, conversations halted, every ounce of attention funneling toward him. Mara straightened, wiping the last streaks from her cheeks, her expression caught between apprehension and a faint hope that whatever he said next would offer some path toward redemption. The hostess stepped subtly closer, almost unconsciously, as if she had taken on the role of guardian of the truth without ever being asked. He continued, "When your mother gave me this ring," he said, addressing Mara but speaking to everyone, "she told me that if I ever built something of my own, I should make sure it was a place where no one would feel the way she felt in the homes where she worked." A few guests nodded gently, understanding the depth beneath the words, the pain they carried, the promise they represented. "For years," he said, "I thought I would honor that promise by building a life far away from the memories of those rooms, by becoming someone who did not need to look back in order to move forward." His voice softened, but his presence did not. "But sometimes," he continued, "moving forward requires returning to the place where something was broken and choosing to repair it instead of avoiding it." Mara stared at him, eyes wide, chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. "You mean this restaurant?" she whispered. He nodded once. "Yes, but it is more than that." The manager leaned forward, the bartender stiffened, and even the couple nearest the door paused mid-gesture as if trying to anchor themselves for the impact. He drew a quiet breath. "This restaurant group was not simply a business acquisition," he said. "It was the same group your mother once applied to work for years after she left my family's home." Mara's lips parted slightly. "She applied here?" "She did," he confirmed. "More than once. And she was turned away, not because she lacked skill or dedication, but because someone decided she did not fit the image they wanted to present." The word image landed hard, cold, unmistakably cruel. The bartender lowered his head. The manager swallowed visibly, guilt tightening his jaw. He continued, "I found out about her rejections only after she passed away, and I promised myself that if I ever had the chance, I would take ownership of the very places that shut her out and change them from the inside." The room absorbed the revelation with a stunned stillness, the kind that presses against the walls and seems to thicken the air as it settles. Mara's voice cracked as she whispered, "She never told me that. She did not want you to carry her burden," he said gently. "But she wanted the world to be better for you." Tears welled in Mara's eyes again. But this time, they were not just from regret. They were from the beginning of comprehension, the dawning realization of her mother's quiet resilience. The man took another slow breath, grounding the moment. "So understand this," he said, his tone firm but not harsh. "What happened tonight was not a small mistake. It was a painful reminder of the very thing your mother fought against, the thing she hoped would disappear with your generation." He let the words sink in before delivering the final line, the one that shifted the room yet again. "And that is why this place will change. Not simply because I own it, but because her legacy deserves more than silence." The restaurant, once again, fell into a reverent stillness, the kind that precedes transformation. The silence that followed his final declaration did not feel empty. It felt full, thick with the weight of everything that had finally been spoken aloud, everything that had been buried in the quiet corners of memory and inheritance. For a moment, no one moved, as if even shifting in their seats would be disrespectful to the truth that had just taken shape in the center of the room. Then the man lifted his gaze, calm and unshaken, and the atmosphere shifted again, not with tension this time, but with anticipation. "Change," he said, "does not happen because someone demands it. It happens because people decide to carry it." His eyes moved from the bartender to the manager, to the hostess, to the busboy still frozen near the back wall, and finally to Mara, whose tear-stained cheeks reflected the overhead lights. "And starting tonight, every one of you will decide who you are going to be in this place moving forward." Mara swallowed, her voice trembling as she finally managed to ask, "What happens now?" He considered her for a long, quiet moment before answering. "Now," he said, "you take responsibility for your part in what happened. You learn, you grow, and you honor your mother by becoming someone she would be proud of. Mara nodded, her breath unsteady but sincere. I will, she whispered. I will do everything required. I want to earn the right to stay here. He held her gaze a moment longer. You will have the chance, he said. But understand that accountability is not about punishment. It is about change. And it begins the moment you choose to act differently than you did tonight. A soft murmur of agreement rippled through the guests. The elderly woman near the window spoke first, her voice gentle but resolute. Your mother would want you to grow, she said to Mara. Not to walk away. Mara pressed her hand to her chest, as if holding the words in place. Thank you, she whispered. All of you. The hostess stepped closer, her expression a mixture of strength and cautious hope. Sir, she said to the man, what can we do as staff to make sure this place becomes what you intend? He nodded, appreciating the question. Tomorrow morning, he said, a full review team will arrive. There will be new protocols, new expectations, and mandatory training for everyone. No one will be exempt. Every corner of this restaurant's culture will be examined. The manager stiffened slightly, but he did not argue. Instead, he lowered his head in acknowledgement. We will be ready, he said, and I will support whatever reforms you deem necessary. The man regarded him with calm firmness. Good. Because leadership sets the tone. If you stay in this position, it will be to model the standards expected here, not to hide from them. The manager nodded again, this time with conviction. I understand. The man allowed a small breath to escape, not relief exactly, but acceptance. He then turned back to the crowd, the quiet authority of someone who had walked through fire and never let it char his dignity. This place, he said, will become what it should have been all along. A place where every person is treated with respect, regardless of who they are or what assumptions someone makes when they walk through the door. A few guests clapped softly at that, the gentle kind of applause that carries gratitude rather than spectacle. Mara wiped her eyes again, her voice small but sincere as she whispered, Thank you for giving me a chance. Do not thank me yet, he replied gently. Thank yourself when you become the person your mother hoped you would be. She nodded, tears slipping freely, her voice trembling. I will. I promise. Then, with the same quiet dignity that had defined him since the moment he entered, the man reached into his pocket, not to reveal anything dramatic, but to settle the ring once more in his hand. He looked at it with a tenderness that softened the sharp lines of his expression. She believed in change, he said softly. She believed in people. And tonight, I choose to believe. In that too. The room seemed to exhale with him. Not because everything was fixed, but because the path forward had finally been drawn with clarity. And as he turned toward the exit, the entire restaurant watched him with a respect that had nothing to do with his wealth, nothing to do with his ownership, and everything to do with the quiet, unwavering strength he had carried through each moment of the night. He paused at the door, offering the final truth that would stay with every person in the room long after he left. I did not raise my voice tonight, he said. I raised the standard. And with that, he stepped out into the evening air, leaving behind a room forever changed by the power of dignity, legacy, and truth spoken without fear.